Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Take a Stand. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson, best-selling author of the book, The She Myth. So in today's show, I have got the amazing Jennifer Hotchner with me today, and I have asked her to be here for a very specific reason. She is a licensed professional who actually specializes in EMD and somatic experience, if I got that right, and also psychotherapy. So she's been working on that for over 10 years. She's probably going to correct me. I probably haven't got that quite right, but we'll get to that in just a moment. She's actually really specializing in trauma and also spiritual growth. So I've asked her to be here because in the She Myth book, for any of you guys who have actually taken the time or had the opportunity to read it, you will know that in the beginning of the book, we talk a lot about the she myths and the things that hold us back as women, that hold us back, the stories that we continually tell ourselves over and over again, that hold us back from really stepping into our power and being the amazing woman that we are, to be able to lead the life that we are meant to lead. And I know that Jennifer has been working with women and men, for that matter, over a long period of time, and she's certainly seen her fair share of women having to deal with trauma. And I wanted to talk specifically about how trauma actually impacts and plays out over and over and over again in our lives, and sometimes without us necessarily even knowing that that's happening. And then equally, we want to talk about, well, once you've, if you're experiencing trauma, what do you do about that? So I want to welcome to today's show, Take a Stand, Jennifer Hotchner. Welcome here.
Oh, thank you so much, Tracy. And yes, let me just correct EMDR and somatic experiencing. So there we go. That's all that needs to be said about those two trauma modalities. Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to have you here. So like you and I have talked a little bit about in the past about, sort of your background, your experience, and also the book that Vicky Hellman and I wrote, The She Myth, that's got so many stories in it about women, the stories that we tell ourselves over and over and over again. And like I said in the intro, I know that you are somebody who has worked with women for a long time, both men and women, but specifically today we want to help women. So you've worked with them and you've really been able to see and understand the traumas that women go through, and sometimes those traumas that continually play out and the impacts that they actually have on one's life. So where I wanted to start with this is really in a place of, often we think that a traumatic experience needs to be something that is, like really big. It's traumatic. It's really dramatic in the sense. But often that isn't always the case, is it? Sometimes it can be the smallest thing that actually is a trauma that then starts to manifest itself in lots and lots of other ways. So I'd love your insight into that and your experience as to what you've found over those years.
Yeah, what a great question. Yeah, so the impact, the hardest part of PTSD, the most dangerous is actually the invisible. And what I mean by that is that it can replay in the mind state over and over and over again. And that is how we relive it and replay it in our systems. So the question was, yes, most of society, most of what we are taught about trauma is Big Bang, car accidents, physical experiences. But actually, as we have researched trauma more and more, we are discovering what we call complex trauma or developmental trauma. And this is more of how we internalize psychological and emotional messages about ourselves. So, in fact, this is a really, and I'm just needing to slow down here because this is a really important topic. So please forgive me if I need to slow down here. Because in fact, this is where with women we have our own versions of ourselves to deal with. We internalize the abuser, and we internalize the perpetrator, and we internalize the victim. And so, yeah, smaller impacts of trauma can be simply a replay of not being good enough in messages about our bodies, in messages about our worth. For instance, I'll just get personal. You know, my own grandmother was the first misogynistic, anti-Semitic person I met. And she was a woman, and she was Jewish. Now, how does that happen that a Jewish woman is my first abuser that I experienced as a young woman growing up? It's because what she experiences, she passes along. She internalized the perpetrator and the victim. So this is the hidden, more subtle and visible dangers of trauma, and how we pass it along and how we replay it. But most importantly, that's how we hurt ourselves over and over and over again. So yeah, this isn't the loud bang. You know, this isn't the physical. This isn't the car accident. This isn't the loud screech. This is that time where you look in the mirror and you don't ever see your face clearly. Ever. You don't see your own image, you see a version of yourself based on what you took in from many conditioned traumatic views that were your reflection of yourself. So I'll just pause there and let you ask more questions. I'm not sure if I quite answered that, but
no, that's great. And I just want you to know that, like, today, the intention here is that we do take our time. I want to give you as much time as you need to gather, what you need to say, because I can very much see that you're, kind of taking this in and wanting to give across the right information to the right people at the right time. So I think this is very much, it's an interesting thing, because I think it's one of those moments that the right people are going to be listening to today. And I want to give you as much time as you need in the most gentle way as we possibly can, so that this message, because it is so important that we get this across in a gentle manner, that the right people actually receive it when they need to. So I just want you to know that. So if you need to slow down, that is no problem by me. So in terms of, like you saying, often it's the invisible things that happen to us. We don't always see it. Like you said, we don't see that big bang. It's not the big traumatic thing, like visible, I've been hurt in an accident or something like that. And that's the trauma. It's the trauma, like with you talking about your grandma and her, that most like a constant it almost starts with a set of words, and then reinforced over and over and over again, right? And then a moment where you're like, okay, you sort of, something must happen where you start to actually believe. And that's that shift, is that where you're going from, okay, so these words have been said, I've heard them enough times, so therefore they must be true, and therefore we take them. And talk to me more about this internalization piece.
Yeah, thank you. So so if we're going to continue to use the word trauma here, we have to involve the nervous system. Because, that's kind of the way that we can distinguish trauma from maybe just having identities of ourselves. Okay, so if we're going to use trauma here, we're talking about the nervous system and its language. The nervous system lives in fight, flight, and freeze. It has its own communication system. It's our internal instinct that is constantly telling us, am I okay? Am I safe? But now what we're learning about trauma is this is not just a physical question. How we feel safe and how we feel okay actually now is not just about whether we're going to be eaten by a tiger. It's actually how we feel about ourselves, what our right to be here, and judgment. Judgment has become very, very unsafe for us humans in the world. Without dinosaurs chasing us, judgments are chasing us. I'm bad. I'm unworthy. My ass is too big, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so how does the nervous system fit into this? You know, the nervous system responds to what we're thinking about as if it's actually happening. This is why we enjoy books. This is why we enjoy movies. We can feel it in our beings. We can feel it in our bodies. You know, our nervous systems are this, what we call in the trauma field, the gut brain. So the nervous system responds to what I'm thinking as if it's actually happening. But what most people don't get is that if I'm thinking, oh, you know, I'm fat and ugly and therefore a failure and don't have a right to exist in the world, our nervous system actually experiences that as a threat. A threat as if, you know, being punched in the gut. A threat as if, I'm threatening my own life with that kind of judgmental thinking about myself. So, this is, yes, please. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you would use that word as if, you know, the feeling of as if you were being punched in the gut. And that's often, you know, words that you would actually hear somebody say to describe when they've gone through, you know, whether it's trauma or they're experiencing some sort of feeling as if I've been punched in the gut.
Yes, absolutely. This is, again, oh, my poor grandmother, rest in peace. I'm portraying her in a way that isn't totally fair because she was also my greatest supporter and loved me dearly. But she, she would look at my sister and I, and in utter panic, she would scan our bodies and criticize. And later, panic though. Fear this was about our survival, how we looked. And, so this is just an example of, yes, how the nervous system, it's a tricky thing. I can't talk about it in the most conclusive, expert way because we're still learning a lot about it. But just isn't it interesting that our judgments, our versions of ourselves, actually do play into a threat to our nervous system, our right to be here, our right to feel okay on this earth. And this is why my work has led me into spiritual growth, because this is actually a question of, do I have a right to be here? Do I feel safe? Do I feel okay? That is constantly linked to what I believe about myself. Yes.
So what's fascinating about this is that over the last few months, as we've launched the She Myth book, I've also been doing a series of interviews with women. And what you're talking about here is like, that's what's playing out. These are the things that they are also talking about. And what's really interesting too is that you've now kind of gone down the spiritual path and combined the two together, because you're understanding that it does impact the nervous system. And if we can get to a point where we're comfortable and confident, but you're working on yourself from an inside out. This is kind of some of the things that I'm hearing from these other women say. I've had all of these adversities in my life. I've had trauma, crisis, so on and so forth. And there was a turning point when I realized, you know what? I need to start working on myself. And it's not working on myself from kind of an external point of view. It's working on myself internally. So in terms, is that when you're working with, with your patients or your clients in a professional, realm, and they come to you with these sorts of things, what general, are you seeing patterns there? Is there a general patterns that you see? And are there certain things that people can do that help them to overcome the that constant chatter, because that's what it becomes, right? It becomes that constant chatter of, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, you know, and it must be true because my grandma said so, you know. So all of these things playing in our life, and then we start to manifest them into, well, I can't do that job because I'm not worthy enough. How could I possibly get in front of a camera? Nobody's going to like me. I can't possibly wear that piece of clothing because my butt's going to look big. Whatever the case may be, we start to kind of take those stories and we insert them over and over and over again into different parts of our life. So what are you seeing in terms of that after working with many, many people over years?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and $1 million question, right? Because this is the patterning of being human. The trauma of being human is that you know, if I could just invite the human and not just pull out the women here. Of course, that's what we're focusing on, but that, you know, that we have a tendency to live ourselves, to know ourselves through the versions, the images, the ideas, the patternings, the beliefs. You know, that is the reflection that we live with over and over and over again. So when I'm working with trauma, you know, you mentioned inside out, and you mentioned that so many women now are kind of, that you have talked to are maybe leaning more towards the spiritual. Well, you know, there's so many angles on that, and there's so many different ways that people are talking about this now, which is such a blessing. I mean, it's really starting to shift. So all I can say is that over the 10 years, this is what has shown up for me, and that is, I had to close my eyes for this. That is that the detangling out of these versions of self, these ways that I am abusing me, I am playing the perpetrator, I am playing the victim. It's like a withdrawing out of the investment of those images, the investment of those stories, which also means the withdrawal out of trying to make them different or fight them. Because that kind of just keeps us in that story of victim perpetrator. So when I say withdrawal out of the investment, I'm really talking about something very simple, which is our attention. But that is such a small word for what that is, attention. I mean, this thing in us that can pull out and give attention to a different part of our being. So what I've noticed, and this is especially helpful in soothing with trauma, because remember, again, the nervous system is responding to what we're thinking and believing. So when we invite the attention to go into what, this is how I word it with my clients. I call it the bigger beingness. I call it the landscape of the being. I call it sometimes just the body. I call it sometimes the soul. And sometimes I call it the bottom up. But what I'm pointing to is, you know, is withdrawing the focus from all of that storyline and going within, but to a deeper, grander part of ourselves. And the thing that is difficult about this, but also so easy, is that it does not have images of us. It's in the dark. It's intuitive. It's a felt sense. There's not good, bad, right or wrong. And there's not future and there's not past. But it is peaceful. It is soothing. And it helps regulate the nervous system. So when I'm inviting people into the deeper parts of their beings or their beingness, they're automatically feeling the felt sense of the here and now, which is supportive, but they're feeling their being as everything they want, everything they need, and it's right here. They didn't have to go anywhere for it. And the thing about that is then all of a sudden the nervous system isn't responding to all of those bang up storylines and images. It's responding to this peace, this okayness. And everyone knows what I'm talking about. I call it the feedback system when I say there is a felt sense experiencing of thinking me and the being, and the being, and the being. The being is safe because it's not being bombarded and having to deal with all of the judgment. It's already okay. So then the nervous system, when it gets to have a sense of when the attention is brought into this grander landscape of being, I'll just put it that way. I love finding all sorts of different ways to put it. The nervous system goes, oh, I'm okay. I'm safe. And those fight, flight, freeze responses begin to regulate. When those begin to regulate, then the thoughts start to clear up. They start to get more positive. There's more of a realistic, in-tune truthfulness about what we are that shows up. So my description of this is, easier to describe. It's more difficult to do. It's a practice. And it's a very in-person practice, and it is completely dependent on the woman's own source of herself. It's nothing external at all. And that is the beauty of this. This is an internal power that we're accessing.
What's really, I suppose, liberating about that, that is liberating. It is freeing, because when you can do that, and you, like with what you've just described, is that inside of every single one of us, we actually have the power. We're the ones that we have the knowing and that being right inside of you. And so therefore, once you know, and like you were saying, it's a practice, it's a thing that we need to learn how to do. We need to get quiet. We need to, focus and be, our attention in a particular place. But once you've learned that practice and you're able to do that over and over and over again, that whole connection you're talking about to that nervous system and just getting us out of that kind of like, traumatic, I'm on edge a moment where you're now calm. My body is, doing all the things that it needs to be doing. I'm feeling a sense of safety, a sense of everything's okay, and a sense of well-being. And I absolutely love that, because that is, when we can shift from, like we're talking about the she-myth stories, those stories running around in our head, to now, actually, what's the truth here? That's where the truth is, right? The truth is lying from within. So I want to ask this question now. So what are some of the signs? Like we open this whole conversation up with like kind of that traumatic, trauma. And often, like I said, often people think the trauma is big, when as we've gone through this, we're now seeing it's not always the big, huge thing. It's the silent things. It's the things that actually we often are our own worst perpetrator. So what are some of the signs that one would see that maybe you are in that traumatic phase, but not even realizing it? Like it's the invisible things. How do we recognize that? And then what can we do about it?
Yeah. Again, I'll just bring up what I like to call our internal feedback system. And what's so brilliant about this is, we can simplify the signs or our feedback system to pain or more ease, more sense of alignment, more sense of rightness, more sense of here-ness. So, I could simply say, but this isn't enough, so I will go on. Pain. Pain is the sign.
Yeah.
But, pain shows up in so many different ways. So, the language of the nervous system, fight, flight, and freeze, I can talk about that because that's more of the trauma signs. So, fight is, more in the category of what we would call irritation, anger, and also projecting out to the outer world that the threat is that I'm being attacked, that basically seeing maybe projected into the world your perpetrators everywhere. Flight is more of the, kind of wanting to hide, wanting to run away, and both of the fight and flight instincts are what we call sympathetic nervous system responses. So they often have like a lot of the tightening, they have the quickness of breath, the heartbeat that's fast. And then we have freeze, which is sort of the granddaddy of the protective instincts. And that's one that a lot of people are familiar with, but it's harder to name and describe. And that's what we associate with disassociation and the parasympathetic. So that's more of the going numb. That's more of the flatlining. You're actually feeling kind of limp and dull. A part of that experience is a kind of leaving one's body, feeling foggy, feeling floaty. Now, a person can have all three of these, and sometimes we have one that, for whatever reason, the being kind of, if that's their thing, that's their style, Like for me, freeze is definitely my default. Those of us that grew up with complex trauma or developmental trauma, which tends to happen at younger ages, the freeze and the disassociation responses are more common because children can't fight back or run away from their caretakers or their environment. I would also say that, the description of constantly being banged around in your head, everyone knows what I mean by that, but a replaying of the images that, even though maybe they're pulling in current storylines, like my boss or my husband, but for some reason they feel so familiar, right? And they're like, they can on a daily basis put a new face on it, but it's got the same storyline. It's got the same type of feeling. It's got the same fear. It's like uncanny. And, the person starts to go, okay, somehow this can't just be the outer world because that's the pattern that I see. I'm the common equation here. There must be something deeper here. Trauma, PTSD, the beauty of it, if I can say that, it's a catalyst for our evolution. This is maybe more my opinion, but, it's going to keep wanting to see itself until it can heal itself. It's going to want to keep playing itself out until there's a deeper knowing, a deeper seeing, and a rewiring that occurs. That's how I like to look at it anyways. It's not just battering us around to torture us. It's beckoning our attention. So when you ask what to do, it's kind of what we were just talking about moments ago. It's pulling in, and what I like to say, going to the sensations, the emotions, and attempting to uncouple the negative beliefs, the storylines from the felt sense experiencing, the emotions, the sensations. This way, the body actually, the system, the being knows what to do with trauma. Just how when you cut yourself, it knows how to heal. Our emotions are so wise. They come, they reach their peak, they go, they have their own energy, they have their force. Same with physical sensations. What makes it more complicated is when our interpretations, our judgments, our thoughts sort of catch them and get in the way. Especially thoughts about emotions, right? It's weak to be this way, vulnerable that way. So, when we're talking about what to do, there's really a different relationship with what I call that bottom-up being, where we get out of the way, meaning we, our stories, our versions of ourselves, try to get out of the way and make room for a natural healing process that actually knows what exactly to do with the trauma. Again, when I speak about this, it sounds maybe so simple and easy, but it just takes some gentleness and some time and a different relating to pain. And I guess I just want to say one more thing about that. Pain, I think if I can say in this is my own opinion again, in the therapy field, in the psychology field, pain has gotten a bad rap. It's diagnosed. There's labels on it, which I think tends to scare people away from themselves. But in this case, in the way that I'm talking about it, pain is that feedback system that's saying, come closer. I need your attention. Come in. Look at me. Listen to me. Be with me. Heal me. I've got something for you. And, you know, when we can stop being afraid of our own pain and kind of go towards it more and more, you know, that's when we start to feel safer and more home in our being. The nervous system actually is very frightened when we keep leaving ourselves. Keep leaving ourselves. So that basic attention and turning towards, you know, I tell clients this all the time. I mean, sure, I can be a benefit in therapy, but the more you learn how to turn towards attending to it, I mean, it's no different than picking up that baby in the crib and saying, sweetheart, I got you. I got you. I got you. That nervous system soothes. So it's so simple. It's so right here. We've just got a lot of muck getting in the way.
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, it sounds so simple, right? But yet, for some reason, you think about a young child, and if you keep leaving it all the time, how traumatic that is for that young child. You know, is my mum going to come back? Is that going to happen? Whereas, in fact, we're actually doing that with ourselves. We don't often stop to think about it in that manner. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I've got a few things coming through actually on the chat today, and I just wanted to acknowledge this. So one of our viewers saying the stories that are never ending, stories are never ending until such time as the healing begins. And that's obviously what we're talking about that today is like, you'll continue to play those stories over and over and over again until we do the things that Jen's talking about, and we start healing paying attention to ourselves and being present with oneself. The other thing that I've got on here is, how can we move past, this is a question that's coming through, how can we move past things that we have shame and begin to forgive ourselves? So somebody in our viewership is asking that. How can we move past things that we have shame about and then start to begin to forgive ourselves?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I don't want to give an easy fix-it answer. I mean, the question in and of itself shows that the person that asked it cares about herself. So how can we get past our shame, and how did she word it, and heal
and begin to forgive ourselves?
Yeah, and begin to forgive ourselves. How can we move past shame and begin to forgive ourselves? Yeah. I'm just going to take a moment with this. Yeah, this may not be the most satisfying answer to whoever asked this question, but it is actually to move towards the shame. And what I mean by that is to really slow down the interpretation of what we think we know about what shame is. So again, I call it bottom up and I call it top down. The top down is our commentator. The top down is our interpreter. The top down is our judger, and the top down is often where our perpetrators, our abusers, our internalized voices live. The top down will kind of slam against or suppress our deeper, more vulnerable emotions. Shame is a very big one. It's got a lot of physical attributes to it. So as I was saying earlier, we want to learn how to not totally assume shame is bad, not totally assume I know what it is yet. And actually what I guide folks to do is to find it in the being, in the body, how it activates itself. What is its shape? What is its color? What is the felt sense of it? To even ask it, what are you? What are you? And begin to go towards it, to listen into it so it can start to talk to you. And then just like you were saying moments ago, Tracy, now we're setting up that caring relationship between the host and the shame, the mother and the infant, so to speak. Shame is like an infant. I think most people find shame goes way, way back, and almost before we can speak for a lot of us. God, it's, not even ours. It's often what we inherited. But anyways, Forgiveness is also one of those words where we may have that top-down commentator going, you must forgive. This is what forgiveness looks like. This is what you're going to feel like, get past this. I don't know if this is true for this questioner, but forgiveness may have a bit of an abuser or a feeling tone in it that wants the shame to go away. But I'll tell you what, the more and more you can turn towards it, listen to it, be with it, get to know it, listen to it, hear what it's shaming itself about, hear its narrative. The more that you can access that bigger being that knows how to respond to it without judgment. And the more we can respond to it without judgment, the more the shame narrative starts to unravel itself and feel safer in the bigger beingness, and then maybe even dissolve. The wording forgiveness tells me, if I was working with this client, that the shame has a story about itself, that I need to be forgiven for something. Great. Well, that's where we start. We listen for that. Well, okay, dear, I'm talking to the shame, What do we need to forgive here? What did I do wrong? So, yeah, that's just kind of an example of the tone of it. I'm not sure if I exactly answered that client's question. There's so many different ways to answer that, but
I mean, and like you say, there's loads of ways you could answer it, but it's such a deep question, right? And I mean, this person is coming back and asking a few more questions, and I think potentially this is a whole different conversation on a different show that we could absolutely do about that, because actually a number of people are actually saying, yeah, I'm with you when this person has asked that question. A number of other people are saying, yes, I'm with you on this one, and they're also saying that often, what can you say about the shame may not be yours? So I don't know if we want to answer that today, or maybe we hold that and we come back for another show and we actually delve a little bit deeper into that some of these feelings, some of the things that we're identifying today. Like today is fantastic because it's giving everybody a really big overview of the trauma and how it has different kind of levels for everybody, where it comes from. Sometimes it can come from, right when we were born, sometimes even before we were born. And we'll go into all of that, I'm no doubt, in another conversation. But I want to go today because we are, I'm just conscious of your time, and I want to go down the path of, so when somebody realizes this, when somebody realizes that, yeah, I've got all of these things going on, and I'm ready. I want to start changing the narrative. I want to start changing the stories that I'm telling myself over and over again, and I'm ready to heal. When does it make sense for somebody to give that a go on their own, and when does it make sense for somebody to get some help?
Yeah, it's always makes sense for both to happen. Always, always. First of all, to give it a go on your own, it is impossible to not be on your own with it. Always. This is where I live. Always. I am always on my own with this. I'm always in my own house, in my own being. So I would say, there's no escaping that, and that is also the source of the empowerment, I guess you could say, is that even if you do work with another, you're also always responsible for how you're being with it in yourself, how you're receiving. I don't know if responsible is the right word, but I think I would rather say bringing a deeper awareness to your own connection with yourself. Again, this is so important because, as I have said over and over, we are often triggering our own traumas. So being on our own with it means a constant connecting, a constant relationship, a deeper listening to what is happening in here? What am I thinking and believing? And how can I bring attention to what I call that bigger beingness? That bigger sense of okayness. But getting help is so valuable because oftentimes we need help in witnessing ourselves. So this is where these shows are amazing, groups are amazing, therapy is amazing. This is why we like really good movies. This is why we like your book so much, all of these different stories, because we often can witness ourselves in a different way when we're in therapy, when we're in groups, when we're listening to someone talk. It's like it zooms out and looks in at itself in a deeper way, almost like it bypasses all that brutal commentary for a moment, and you just get to be and see yourself, with a different lens. And so, I would recommend working with someone, even if you're not in crisis. And if that's a therapist, great. If that's a group, great. If that's, journaling, asking for help, being with someone. Really what we're just doing is magnifying the lens on ourselves, finding a safer way to look in, because we may not be so safe for ourselves through all the interpretations and judgments.
That is, yeah. I mean, the conversation that we've had today, I know, is just going to really help a lot of people out there. And as I said, it's, you mentioned this is about the human, and it absolutely is. Take a Stand is for the female, but it is for everybody. If you're listening to what Jen's had to say today, and that beingness and being with yourself and putting the attention where it needs to be, which is, internal and on ourselves, to start that healing process, and just acknowledging that from time to time we do take these, if you've got stories running around in your head, it is most likely, some trauma. You're creating the trauma that is allowing it to happen over and over and over again. And she's demonstrated today how that starts to play out in lots of different ways. She talked about it being wrapped in a different wrapper, and that's essentially what we're doing each and every time. So I want to make sure that everybody knows today, Jen, if they want some help from you, or they can get more from you, where is the best place that they can go?
Yeah, my website, jenniferhochner.com. Hochner is Hotchner. jenniferhochner.com.
All right. So, guys, if you want to connect with Jen, go to jenniferhochner.com. I'll make sure that gets put into the comment section and also in the show notes, so that you know exactly where to go. I want to say thank you so much to Jennifer today for being such an amazing guest and sharing, many, many years of experience that she's had, being so gentle and really tapping. I really saw you tapping into making sure that you were able to deliver exactly what was required, taking your time with that. And I want to thank you so much for doing that. It is it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Jen and I have spoken about having her back to do another couple of conversations about these particular topics, about how we can overcome a lot of the she myths. I want you guys to be able to shift them right out of the road so that you can move forward and actually be and start being the person that you have inside, that you're born to be. And if you haven't already, like I said, you can head on over and purchase your copy of The She Myth. You can go to amazon.com or to amazon.com.au, and we talk more about these things inside of the book. And then also we'll give you some very practical tips on how to create success as a woman in business. You'll be redefining the world of women in business. That's what we're doing. So thank you so much for being here today, Jen. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave our viewers with today before we bring a close to today's session? And we'll also be chatting backstage to figure out when the next time is that you'll be appearing on the Take a Stand show.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say, I hear you. I hear you, shame. I hear the shame that's out there, and it's collective. It's not actually, one person that gets to own that. We all can look into that together. I think shame has come up today for a lot of women. And that's not a mistake. So perhaps, yes, Tracy, we can have a special show about that, because that might be an aspect of trauma for women that's more specific to women, shame. And I would like to explore that more. And, just to say, it's all of ours. It's all of ours. No one gets to own it uniquely. And in and of itself, that maybe that can provide some support in and of itself. And we can go into that more in our future show. And so thank you so much for having me. I love to be a part of this topic and to talk about this, just traveling in these beautiful forums called women, and all these challenges, and the most important thing, which is finding our way back home to a well-being that's already here.
Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and you just being here and sharing all of that with everybody. I wanted to give everybody an opportunity, actually, because we're going to have Jen back on the show. We will do a show specifically on that topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys a link. I want you to go to Tracy M. Wilson, go to the show podcast tab on my website, and on there you are going to find a section where you're able to submit questions for me. So if there is something specific that you would like us to discuss on the upcoming show that we will do in a few weeks' time, or maybe in a month, with Jennifer, then I want you to go there and I want you to just record your question, and we will make sure that we have an opportunity to answer that on an upcoming episode. So go to Tracy, Tracy, M for Mary, Wilson.com, and find the section that says podcast and show, and on there is an area that you can actually record me a message and send that off to me, so that I can make sure that we actually cover all of that off in some detail on an upcoming show. But for now, everybody, I want to say thank you so much for being here. Go out, live your life, stand up, stand firm, and stand out in this world of business, because the world needs you, and they need your message and your information right now. So thank you so much for being here, Jen. It was an absolute pleasure having you here, and I look forward to having our next session with you too. I want to have you back. So we'll see you again soon. So bye for now, everybody. We'll see you again soon. I'll be back again with another episode of Take a Stand next Thursday, Brisbane time at 10 a.m. So bye for now.